This one up on the screen is the conclusion of last week. So if you have your handout from last week, this is that one. I know we ran out of time, so I wanted to try to get moving as quickly as possible. And if you don't have it, that's fine, but I'm going to go through these slides quickly so you can fill in those blanks. But we're in Revelation chapter 20. And last week we did verses 7 through 10. Let me just read the verses. That'll get your head into this context. It says, when the 1,000 years were expired, John's, revelation went from seeing the 1,000-year reign to when it's over. Right here, there's nothing in that intro mentioned. Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. He shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. They went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. Fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever. So verses 8 through 10 is where we stopped on number 2, the revolt of society. It says, he shall go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth. It calls them Gog and Magog, to gather them together. And it mentions something here interesting, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And we mentioned last week that, of course, we're coming out of the millennial reign of Christ. So these people that number as the sands, these are the children, the grandchildren, the great-great-grandchildren. These are the descendants of the people that were existing whenever the millennial reign started. And they've never known anything but peace. They've never known anything but perfection in their society. And yet they still have an old nature they're born with. Because they're born on the earth, they are still born with that sin nature that rebels against God. So we see this. But we see letter A, their deadly chains of allegiance. As soon as Satan is released, this is again for your last week's handout, the masses bow to him. The devil will find the fertile soil of rebellion in their hearts. And I had here also that they'll see a witness of God's judgment. So they will have been coming to Jerusalem to worship. And, one commentator said, obviously God rules with, Jesus Christ rules with a rod of iron. He will be judging those that step out of line. He'll be keeping peace, but with that rod of iron. And so there'll be some type of place where that judgment's meted out. Nonetheless, they will know that this is a God that cares about holiness. Then letter C, the group of people is symbolically referred to as Gog and Magog. This group of people, they're the centers of the earth. Now, Gog and Magog, these were out of Ezekiel 38 and 39. The names are the same, but the conflicts differ in time, location, and participants. Let me read you a quote here. It says, Gog is the prince of Meshach and Tubal in Ezekiel 38-39. Magog is the land from which he comes. Here's the passage. It says, and the word of the Lord came unto me, Ezekiel, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief priests of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him. That's the first time we see these names mentioned in the Bible. So in this apocalyptic passage, when John refers to Gog and Magog, they are symbolic names representing the evil forces that are coming up against God. He calls them Gog and Magog. So the battles are the same in that they're both inspired by Satan, and they both cause men to war against God. Then they attack the beloved city, Jerusalem. God's enemies are intent on destroying the place of Christ's throne. Satan can't handle God being in power. He just can't. From the beginning, his pride said, I will be like the Most High. And he can't handle being superseded by anything or anyone. And so Jerusalem falls into the crosshairs of this deadly horde. But then we see the fiery death of the rebels. Look at verse 9. This is an interesting verse. Now, I want you to picture this in your mind as we read it. It says, and they went up on the breadth of the earth. Keep in mind that they were numbered as the sand of the sea. So there's millions of them. And they went up from the breadth of the earth, verse 9, and compassed the camp of the saints about in the beloved city, that's Jerusalem. And look what it says, the next phrase. And fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. They did not so much as raise a rifle. They did not swing a club. They gathered around the city, and the next thing that happened was fire came down from heaven and devoured them. Did these people ever have a chance to rebel against God? Did they ever think that they were going to ever succeed against a godly universe? And I know this is apocalyptic times, but look at it in modern day society. Who do human beings think we are today to rebel against God? The thing is, God doesn't act like this now as far as fire out of heaven, but I kind of wish he did. Because we'd have a lot less mess on the earth now, wouldn't we? Amen. But you see, we live now in the age of grace. This is old stuff we studied, but we live now in the age of grace where God looks at humanity through the eyes of grace, through the blood of his Son that he shed on the cross to give a payment for man's wickedness. But after the rapture happens and the tribulation starts, the age of grace is over. Now it's the age of judgment. And so thank God Christians will be here. But during this point in history, we will see a massive destruction there of the rebels. And then we see the fiery doom of the devil. In the last point, in verse 10, it says, and the devil that deceived them. But it's always talked about deception. It's always deception. The devil that deceived was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. Of course, that's proof positive there that the devil doesn't live in hell now. Okay, we think that, as portrayed from Hollywood and the whole, that Satan dwells in hell and he's the Lord of the dark forces. And okay, he's not there. The angels that are chained in the abyss, that's a separate place. That is not hell, the lake of fire, because when Satan is cast here, what does the Bible say? He will be tormented forever and ever. So he is just as susceptible to the hellfire as human beings. It's not like he's impervious to this. So that's his end. By the way, it's interesting. Jesus Christ himself said in Matthew 25:41, then shall they say unto me on the left hand, depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire. He said this, prepared for the devil and his angels. In the eons of time gone by, when God was creating the earth and he was putting things in place and he made the lake of fire, Jesus revealed here, he made it for Satan and the fallen angels. That was the intention of this. So Satan joins his two cohorts. Notice it says in verse 10, where the beast and the false prophet are. I like how John points that out. These two men that were cast at the beginning of the millennium, remember those guys were bodily cast into the lake of fire. The angel grabbed them, chained them, threw them into the lake of fire. John points out they're still there. Those two guys are still there burning. And that's where Satan now shows up. And of course, at this point, they're there for all eternity. So then the final thoughts on this chapter is these verses describe the final doom of the wicked one. He who has sown wickedness among men since the fall is now forever tormented himself. Satan's judgment was assured at the cross. Christ spoke in John 12:31, now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And then he also stated in John 16:11, the prince of the world shall be judged. So the fulfillment of this prophecy will not take place till the end of the millennial reign of Christ. God has prepared that place of horror for him and for his fallen angels. So ultimately, at the great white throne, which we're going to talk about next, that takes place then right after. So let's